So welcome to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency's webinar for the 2021 Annual Owner Reporting. My name is Ashley Sweeney, and I am the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator at OFA. And this webinar will focus on what is needed to complete your annual reporting submission to OFA. You can access a PowerPoint presentation that we'll go through today in the handout section. So if you have not already accessed that, just scroll down on the right-hand side of your control panel and get that handout that you can download and follow along with us today. Now, hopefully, as we are going through the information, a lot of questions will be answered that you already have in your brain. But if there are some things that are not answered during the presentation, I will be waiting to do any questions and answering them at the end of this presentation. So we will do a Q&A at the end, but I'm going to go through the entire presentation first. And then, of course, if any questions are not answered during the presentation, you can always contact the DevCo Help Desk for assistance. Now, what we'll cover today is, of course, the deadline for annual owner reporting, and then also how to manage your DevCo compliance users, reviewing errors and warnings, reviewing and updating your utility allowances, exporting events, entering and finalizing your tenant data, and submitting your annual certification for each project. We will also discuss some COVID impact to annual reporting this year, since we are still knee-deep in the pandemic. And lastly, we'll talk about some procedures for correcting your compliance findings. This is a new element that we have added this year to the webinar to talk about what to do for compliance findings. So I hope this is helpful for you. And now, actually, this is a good place. We're going to do a couple polls this year, which we haven't done in the past, just to see if you have attended any of our annual reporting webinars before. So the first poll, I just want to know if I have any newbies out there or not. So I'm going to launch that poll right now. Okay, you guys are answering quickly. That's awesome. Just want to keep you engaged since I can't see all your beautiful faces this afternoon. All right, I'll give people a couple more seconds to answer. And I will close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then let's share those results. So 67% of you have been here before, so welcome back. And you've probably heard most of this information. But we do have 33% of newbies. So hopefully, again, this will be helpful for you today. All right, let's hide that. Let's go back. To the monitor here. Okay, and let's keep going. So first, we will discuss deadlines for annual owner reporting. So the AORs are due by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, March 1st of 2022. Now, please plan to have everything submitted by this date. You will need to finalize your tenant data and submit your annual owner certification or certifications for each property. Now, there won't be any extensions at this time, so please plan to have everything in by this date, again, by 11:59 p.m. There are two parts to every annual owner report, so be mindful of this. You have the finalizing of the tenant data and then also submitting that annual owner certification. So make sure that you do both things by this deadline for each of your projects. Now, new projects or those in the lease-up phase must submit an annual owner certification and tenant data if one or more residents were income qualified and they've moved in during the 2021 year. So if you have any new tenants, you have to submit that annual owner report. Even if the entire project has not been leased up yet, you are still required to submit that annual owner report if even one unit is moved into the project. So be mindful of that. Secondly, projects sold during the reporting year. So if you have a new project, that owner that was at the end of the year is responsible for submitting the annual owner report. This includes entering and finalizing the tenant data for the entire year. That's why it's very important that tenant information is transferred to the new ownership entity and or management company if this has changed during the year. Projects only funded with HDAP funds, meaning Ohio Housing Trust Funds, Home Funds, or National Housing Trust Funds, will need to submit tenant data only on those HDAP funded units. Projects in extended use, meaning after the first 15 years of tax credit compliance, are required to report on all rental activity for the 2021 year. So even though you're in extended use, you are still required to submit your annual owner report. This does include move-ins, move-outs, any transfers, composition updates, and rent updates for that project. So a lot of times we don't get that much submission for extended use projects. And I think it's just a lack of knowledge on what needs to be submitted or not. So again, refer to this PowerPoint presentation if you're trying to remember what you should be submitting if your project is an extended use. This is also a reminder that student certifications and income recertifications are not required during the extended use period, so you do not have to do those event types in our database. So the next thing we're going to discuss is annual reporting outside of DevCo. So there's a few different fundings that you have to still submit, but you do not submit them in DevCo. So this does include projects that were awarded tax credits between 2003 and 2017. You have to submit an annual operating survey. And that is going to bring me to our next poll and going to see how many people on the line were awarded tax credits between 2003 and 2017. Let me know if you have to submit an annual owner survey or operating survey. Right, still only got about 61% of you that have voted. No, the annual operating survey is required for projects put into service between 2003 and 2017, not before. Okay, I got about 85% of you that have voted, so I'm going to close it up and just share the results. So on the line, we got about 70 people on the line today. So 63% of you do have to submit this annual operating survey. So be mindful of that. There's just one stipulation for submitting the survey, and that is if you have 10 units or more. So if you are a tiny project and have less than 10 units, then you don't have to worry about this annual operating survey. But most of our projects do have over 10 units. So if you are in that realm, you need to submit this survey. Any questions about that can be directed to Kevin Clark, and that is his email address right there for you to contact him. Next, I want to talk about the Capital Investment Program, or CIP, annual certification. And this also can be found on our website on our compliance policies page. So if you have any CIP funding on your project, and again, if you have any questions about if you do or not, let us know. But if you do, you usually know. You can find that annual cert on our website, and I'm going to click this link here to show you guys where all this information is. So today I'm definitely going to be going back and forth between the presentation and our web pages. So if you're on the compliance page, which this is, you can always find us here at the top where programs, go down to Office of Multifamily Housing, and then compliance. And then you'll find the compliance policies over here, or just use the link in the PowerPoint. If you scroll down, get to annual reporting. And here is where the annual operating survey is found. You can click there to get that Excel file and the PDF for the SIP, annual owner cert. Okay. All right. Let's get back to our presentation. Let's keep going. So next, let's talk about some DevCo resources. The annual reporting requirements chart is always a good resource for you to have. If you click here, it literally will give you all of the different requirements depending on the type of funding you have at your project, and so what is needed to be submitted and what is not. So I always think this is a good cheat sheet to have. So make sure you check this out if you have any questions about what you need to be submitting. And also the DevCo login page. So if you just need to know how to get to DevCo so you can start doing your tenant data and submitting your annual cert. Also, that's just the compliance page that I was just on. Next is the compliance user guide, which is like your DevCo Bible. So any questions you may have about how to manage users, update any utility allowances, anything about entering tenant data, pretty much anything that we're kind of talking about today is in this user guide, but in more detail. And then lastly, the DevCo how-to videos is pretty much your user guide in video form. So it just breaks it down on different subject matters, so you can go there and watch a video. That's the best way for you to learn how to do things. All right, so next, how do you access DevCo online? So you can even start on OFA's homepage, or again, if you went to our link from the last slide, there's a DevCo homepage. But we're going to start here from the regular old OFA page, which is www.ohiohome.org. If you scroll down to the Quick Links portal, which is close to the bottom of the screen, you'll see this lovely DevCo icon. And that does bring you to the DevCo homepage. So in order to get started, you have to log in first. So we're going to click the DevCo login page link there on the right-hand side, and then log in. Now, if you do not know your credentials, meaning your username or password, you need to contact our compliance help desk, or just the help desk now, because it's not just for compliance or DevCo. And make sure we can give you a temporary password if you already have an account. But if you are a new user, you would click this wonderful link here, the new user, register here link, and fill out this form so you can get registered in time to do your annual reporting. So once you are registered and or got your password if you forgot, but hopefully you have been submitting your tenant data on a monthly basis all year, so you already know what your credentials are, you're going to log in to DevCo. And this will bring you to the programs page. Now, in order to do your annual owner cert, you're going to go to the tenant income / owner certification link. I'm also just going to point out the My Organization tab here as well, because you will need this for one part of doing your annual report. So just remember, this is where you can go to get to the My Organization information. Okay, so first we're going to click this link here, and it will give you the property listings page. Now, under properties assigned to you, all of the projects that you have approved access for should be listed here. If you think there is a project that you should have access for or that you have requested in the past, but you don't see it listed, then you know what to do. Contact the help desk and we will assist you. If there is a project that you should have access for and you have not already done so, to request another property, you just click this link up there on the left-hand side and go through the prompts. Another thing to note, if you have a very long list like I do here, since I have literally every project that we have at OFA, is this wonderful filter. If you click the filter and enter in your project name, which our test project today is going to be Tiffin Chase, or Tiffin Points, excuse me, our senior. We're going to use this as our project today, but as you see, it can filter down once you add in the name. But also, if you need to access any older reporting years other than the 2021 and 2022 years, which you should see on the side, you can click this Show All Reporting Years. You do have to enter in the project name first, though, so that's why I showed you that filter. So once you enter some part of the project's name, it doesn't have to be the entire name, then the Show All Reporting Years will come up, and as you see, look at all that is available now. Okay, but we want to go to the 2021 year of our test project, which is Tiffin Senior. And this brings you to the property details page. Okay, so the first thing we're going to discuss today is managing your users on your project. So the Manage Users feature is here on the left-hand side under the Return to Properties listing. Now, if you have the online project owner access type or the online property manager access type, you will have this feature. So you're able to come in here and you will have permissions to approve access, deny access, and remove. And it is the responsibility of that online project owner or manager to manage their users here in DevCo. So if you see any old users that you know no longer works here at your project anyways, or your company, or people that you're like, I don't know who this is, you can always remove them. You don't have to keep them on your project. Matter of fact, you don't want to keep them on your project. So make sure you are managing your users and only keeping current users, as it says here, actually listed on your Manage Users type. Now, if we go back to our PowerPoint, it gives you some permissions and associated roles depending on what type of access you have. So if you are an online project owner, you do have permissions to manage all your users, as we just discussed. You can edit information as far as your management and owner information. You can submit the annual certification, which isn't listed here, and you can finalize the tenant data. Now, people that usually have this role is whoever is the online administrator, owner, or general partner. Now, the online property manager pretty much has the same access as the online project owner. And this usually is the primary manager, or what I've been seeing lately is like a regional manager usually has this access type, or if you are a compliance specialist. Next is the OC editor, and they have permissions to edit information. So you can enter in like tenant data and utility allowance information, but you wouldn't be able to actually finalize the year and submit the annual certification. So be mindful of that. And then lastly, your OC viewer has permissions only to view information on a project, but you cannot do any edits. And this is usually someone who is a syndicator or an investor for a project who has this type of access. All right, and this is just another visual of who usually has what type of access. And this same picture is in the DevCo Compliance User Guide, just in case you want to get access to that. All right, so we will keep going and talk about the project information update. So ownership and management information is listed on the project's details page. So if we go back and return to property details, this is the property details page. You scroll down, you see the owner entity information and the management company information listed on the first page. You will also see all the programs that are for this project. So we see we have home funds, some LIHTC funds, and multifamily bonds. And just in case you can't remember what reporting year you're in, it will always tell you on this property details page. I know that seems very simple, but a lot of times people try to enter in their information and they're on the wrong reporting year. So this is just a good place to make sure you are in the right reporting year when you're trying to enter your tenant data. Lastly, I want to mention these two charts here for your income levels and your rent levels. These two charts were added to DevCo when we started doing income averaging projects. And you will only see these two charts if you do have tax credits on your project. So if you are HSTAP funded only, meaning home funds, National Housing Trust, or Ohio Housing Trust funds only, you will not have these charts listed. Be mindful that the required column of these two charts will show you what percentages are needed. So you see this project is only a 60% project, and then it shows you what is entered for the project as well. If you think that there should be some extra income or rent levels that are not listed here on these two charts, again, only if you have tax credits, then you need to contact the DevCo Help Desk and we will look into this for you. Just a reminder that these charts should reflect what is in your restrictive covenant and or funding agreement. Okay. So down here, as we see, we're going to look at our owner entity and our management company information. And there are some information that's missing as far as contacts are concerned. So as you see with these two boxes that are blank, we definitely want to update this information when we enter the annual certification a little later. So just be mindful of that. You always want to check that info, and if it is incorrect or missing or out of date, then you want to submit this information when you are entering the annual certification. Next, we want to review our bins and units. So again, you can always get to your bins and units through the property details page. This page should show you each bin. As you see, it should always have the OH and then the numbers behind it. If you click the plus sign, that would open up all of the bins all of the units in that bin. If you think the name of the units are incorrect or the unit's size, meaning bedroom size, as it's listed here on the unit information page, if you click the unit, again, contact that lovely help desk because all of these things are locked down, so you cannot update them on your own. So make sure if you are trying to enter information, and this usually affects utility allowances when you're trying to enter them if you have the wrong bedroom size. So definitely let us know by contacting the help desk and we will get that updated for you so you can continue to report. Okay, so now that you have kind of gone over all the information on your project, it is time to start entering data. So before you do your tenant data, you always want to enter your utility allowance information first. This can be accessed on the right-hand side of the screen here at the right hand at the top, and you'll see the utility allowance page. Now, utility allowances need to be reviewed and updated on an annual basis. Even if your UA amount has not changed for the year, you are still required to update this information in DevCo on an annual basis. So as you see here, we have utility allowances for the 2019 year and the 2020, but we have to enter in our 2021 information. But since this utility allowance has not changed, meaning there has not been a new effective date, we just want to push the copy button, and it's going to copy everything that was in that last utility allowance. And all you want to do is update your verified date. So if there's no information that has changed quite yet, then you just need to update the verified date, which I'm just going to change the year, and then push save. It's very simple when you're just trying to copy that information. Another thing you want to note when you are entering utility allowances is to make sure you are clicking all the bins that are associated with that particular allowance right here on the right hand side. And as you see, all of the bins that are needed have been clicked. The other two, as you see, is the market building, so we're not going to need UAs. And then this one as well, building number 4A. So once you make sure all this information is updated, you just push save. And you see that new utility allowance is now entered. You can always see the date that this utility allowance is for by the first four numbers when you look at the description. So you see this is 2021 here, and then also you just want to check those verified and effective date columns to make sure the information is correct. Now, if you want to add a new utility allowance because you have a new one, either through the PHA or you've had a new OFA approved utility allowance, you just want to click new, and you always skip the description box, add in a new verified date, which my OFA approved UA was verified on March 1st of 2021. And any new utility allowance should have the same verified and effective dates, okay? You do not want to make the verified date different from the effective date if it is a new utility allowance. That is very important. That ends up causing issues because DevCo is looking at that verified date kind of as the date if you can use it on a particular unit or not. We want to pick the building style. This is very important if you are doing XML uploads. You have to choose a building style for XML uploads. If you are manually entering data, this is not a requirement, but it's always good to just have extra data. So we are going to put that low rise here, and this is for our 2-bedroom. Again, this is an OFA approved, and we're going to say it's the HUSM. So this is the HUD utility model, and it's electric only. So we're going to put electric in here. Let's say $65. You have to just fill everything out. This is tenant paid. And then again, that is the HUSM type. Make sure we mark our bins when entering this information and push save. All right, now you see my new UA is also entered here on our chart here. So now we have our 2 UAs for the 2021 year. So now we can go to our property details page to start entering in our tenant data. But again, make sure you always enter that utility allowance information first. It'll make your life easier so you don't have to go back and enter in information. So next, once you have entered that UA info, you need to enter tenant data based on when it occurred. So you do not want to enter data by event type. For example, entering in all your move-ins, then going back to enter in all your move-outs. That would be incorrect. So we want to enter everything in chronological order, okay? Now, this year, I am not going to go through and talk about how to enter tenant events, just because all of that information is in our lovely DevCo how-to videos. So instead of spending the time on how to enter this information, you can look at last year's video or go to any of the other DevCo how-to videos to figure out how to enter this type of info. But I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint presentation so we can talk about that, what's listed here. Okay, and we went through utility allowances, and we'll just talk about the event types instead. So these are all of the different event types that are able to be entered into DevCo. So first is the lovely move-in that everyone's probably familiar with. This is going to be your initial certification for a tenant and or household. So every project and every unit should have a move-in initially. Move-outs is when the tenant leaves the unit. Recertify event. This is when the household needs to complete this event if they have market rate units at the project, if you're a tax credit, or if you have any HSTEP fundings. You are required to do annual recertifications, so you have to enter your recertify events into DevCo. The transfer out event. Again, this is if you were just transferring from one unit to the next, and our system will automatically enter a transfer in event in the system once you enter that transfer out event. Be mindful that transfer out and in dates are 1 day apart. So you usually want to make sure your transfer out date is the day before someone actually transferred. And we talk about that in the next slide as well. Next is composition updates. So whenever there is a change in household composition, meaning someone moves in or out of the unit, then you need to complete this in DevCo. So this is if you're adding someone to a household or someone moves out. We do need to know that information. So you have to put the composition update in the system. Composition update should happen when it actually occurred. So you don't want to wait into a recert to tell us when someone has moved in. We do want to know when they actually moved into that unit. Next is rent updates. Now this is anytime there's a change in rent, this needs to be completed. And I actually got a really good question yesterday in the help desk about when rent updates should be completed. And this does include anytime there's been a subsidy change. So it's just not when your tenant payment has changed. So if the utility allowance amount has changed, that means that the rent amount has changed, or subsidy payment, or if the tenant's actual rent has changed. So any of those three would mean that you enter in a rent update. So be mindful of that. And then lastly, the student updates. This is the event that needs to be entered when your household signs the annual student certification form. So if you are 100% tax credit, there's no need for recertifications, but you do have to enter your student updates on an annual basis. And again, this is optional for extended use projects. Now let's get into some rules for entering tenant events and or tips. So again, events need to be entered in chronological order, and this is even across certification years. So that means if you're in the 2021 year and you try to enter in a student update, and it gives you a little note at the top that says events must be entered in chronological order, and you're like, what? There is no other event in this year. That's probably because someone has already entered some 2022 event in the system. You would have to go into that 2022 year, delete that event in order to enter in your 2021 information first. So again, this does go across all certification years. So make sure things are entered in order. So you may have to delete some events. Next, for market rate units, you have to change the unit identity on the events detail screen. So a lot of times when we are looking through our compliance findings, someone has not changed the unit identity correctly, and this causes some errors. So this is the unit identity. So instead of saying program unit, you would change to either manager or market. and this changes the income levels and the rent levels on the unit. So I'm going to go into DevCo just so you guys can see this, just for an example. Yeah, put it in here. Boom, 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 here. Okay, so I have a recertification, and this happened on 12/1 of 2021. But I just realized that Ella is not a program unit, so she doesn't have any actual affordable housing. She is a market rate unit. So I'm going to change that unit identity to market. And you see, once I change the identity, it automatically changes your rent levels and your income levels. So that is really important for our analysts, so they know to not count this when they're doing their compliance checks. So anytime you see this, this is what they're telling you to change, that unit identity. Want to make sure you push update so that does stick. Okay. All right. So let's get back to some tips. The next one is the HDAP units. You have to mark the HDAP award box on those correct units. It's really important. So if you have, again, Home, Ohio Housing Trust, or National Housing Trust, you have to mark those home units or trust fund units accordingly on that event. And again, that's just a little screenshot to show you what it looks like, and making sure you're marking that and pushing update at the top so that does stick. Next, 100% live tech projects, which I've already mentioned, do not have to complete recertifications. Let me switch that so you can see it bigger. There we go. But you must enter them student updates. So we already talked about that. Let's continue to the transfer outs. And this is just an example for you that the date is 1 day before the transfer in date. So that example is the transfer out is 2/1 of 2020. So the transfer in date will be 2/2 of 2020. Next is when manually entering tenant events, you always enter the income and rent information at the top first, and then you have to push this top update button. So on the event detail screen, there are 2 update buttons. And anytime you want to open up the bottom portion to update household member info or to update your income and asset information, you have to push this button first at the top. And there's also even a little spiel here about what you need to do. It says, when entering a new event, you must first click update before adding, deleting, or modifying household member, asset, and income information. After making all of the changes, you must click update again at the bottom, I should say at the bottom, to complete the event. So be mindful of that. You want to click the update button at the top and then enter your household info and additional income information. Lastly, let's always talk about using the calculate total household income and member income button if you are entering that information. This updates the entire form correctly. So if you do any income and asset updates, make sure you click that lovely button before you push update at the bottom of the screen. All right, so that's some tips and rules on how to enter your tenant events. Next, let's talk about COVID impact, because as you know, the recertification waiver was still going on in the 2021 year. So you were not required to do income recertifications between April 1st of 2020 through September 30th of 2021. So we understand that you may not have completed all your research, but you are required to put clarification records in the files that income recertifications were not completed. So it's just not just a blanket waiver. OFA's policy always stated that you have to put a clarification record in those files. So make sure that you have done that. And then also the student status certifications were still required throughout the entire COVID period. So student updates for all of last year will need to be completed in DevCo. All right, let's talk about export events. So you can always access the export events feature from the property detail screen. It's up there on the right-hand corner, as you see here. This is where you can overview all of the events entered for the reporting year. And property owners and managers can export this into an Excel spreadsheet, which I always think is really nice to have that feature. This is a great way to review all of the information before you finalize your tenant data for the year. So to give you an example of this, we go back to our property details page, go to export events. You see we don't have too much listed here on our fun test property, but you push this export events button and it automatically puts it into an Excel file down here. So you can open that and look at the file that you need. This is not the right file, but boom, boom, boom. I got too many files open on my computer. Here we go. Okay, so this is the file that shows you all of the tenant data. So this, I think, is a great feature to have if you don't have something like this already on your project, that you can see everything that's entered for each of your tenants. All right, let's go back to our presentation. That it goes like that. There we go. And let's talk about import events. Now, import events is for our XML users. So anytime you have an XML file, you will be importing data. And let's use the raising hands feature. If you are a company that uses XMLs to enter in your tenant events, could you raise your hand? Just push that little hand feature on the side, just so I know how many XML users we got out there. If not, that means you're just entering things manually. XMLs is a little easier than manual because you've already entered the data and it just kind of plops it in there for you. All right, I got a few hands raised. I bet there's probably more of you. I know for a fact, I'm looking at names like I know you do XML. But yes, thank you for participating. I'm just going to put everyone's hand down just to know if this information is beneficial for everyone. But there is a section in our DevCo compliance user guide that goes through how to do XML uploads. One thing I want to point out is that your XML file should be at a 4.0 standard or below. So DevCo does not support a NAMA 4.0 standard or above. So if you have like 5.0 or 6.0 or whatever, it has to be converted down to a 4.0 or below. So be mindful of that. And then we do have a wonderful YouTube how-to video, and I actually put the link in here so you can look at that. That was updated a couple of years ago, but everything is still the same since we have updated that video. So any questions about that, or if you're having any issues, a lot of times people get minor errors when they're entering their XML files. And if you haven't done it before, you may not know how to correct those errors. So our DevCo help desk is very helpful for that. So just let us know what the error is and someone will get back to you so they can either help you correct your file or tell you how to do so. So always reach out to the help desk. All right, so next we're going to talk about reviewing errors and warnings in DevCo. So this is on the property details screen. It's usually below the property name. There's an error link, as you see here in this little screenshot. It's going to list any issues that need to be resolved before finalizing. So if you have actual errors listed, those are very rare these days. I don't think I've seen an actual error in DevCo in years, but hey, anything is possible. This must be corrected before you're able to finalize your tenant data. Now, if you see any warnings listed, you should definitely review them and try to correct them before you finalize the data, but you are able to finalize without correcting your warnings on your units. So let's again go back to lovely DevCo and our Tiffin Senior project. And again, as you saw in that screenshot, there was one issue listed. Let's see what that issue is. And it says the utility allowance is required. So that means that the UA was not listed for that unit. See, we don't have the utility allowance listed. Now, of course, you can always just finalize with this hanging out there, but this will come back up in your compliance letters once our analysts do their compliance checks. So it always makes sense to just update things now. So you can put in the UA and you see the allowance amount already automatically puts it in here. And then we just push the update button and our lovely error goes away. Now, one thing to note about utility allowances that I don't think I noted earlier is that if you have owner paid utilities, there's no need to enter it in the utility allowance section, but you just put it on the building or the bin, the building identification number. So you click the actual bin and there is a button here that says owner pays utilities. So if you click that button and push update, then our system knows that for that entire building, we shouldn't be looking for utility allowances in those units. Again, you can go through all of your buildings if you have owner paid UAs for the entire project, or maybe it's just for a particular type of building, but usually it's for the whole project. So you would have to go through each bin to update this info. Okay. So anyway, so once you have updated all of your errors and warnings, then it is time to finalize the year. So again, this is giving you a little screenshot of where the finalize year button is right there on the right-hand corner. And once the process is completed, you can submit this tenant data to OFA. We've already talked about resolving errors. Now, there's one thing to note, that if you were trying to finalize a project and you don't go through the entire process, which a lot of times it happens if someone is trying to update a warning or an error, and you click out of the finalize page, you're unable to edit any information at that time. So like you'll try to go back to the tenant events to update info and it will not let you. That is because the screen has moved on to a different access type. So instead of being in an active state, it is now in property review state. So you're unable to enter tenant data. And if this does happen, you just need to contact the help desk. Again, help desk is always here for you. So if you have started to finalize, but for some reason you never finished, you just contact the help desk and they will put it back to active for you. So we're going to go here to our lovely project and go to finalize year. And then it says start finalization. You just click that button. Again, I only had that one warning before, so I am going to just proceed to finalize since we do not have any warnings or errors. And then push finalize. And that is how easy it is. As you see, it tells you who finalized it and on what date and time. So that gives you a record of your information. You can always take a screenshot of this so you can have it for your records. And I actually, that is a good practice to do to make sure you have a record of when you've submitted this information to us. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the annual certification. Dun, dun, dun. So let's go back here. So the annual cert is right under the finalized year, and this is a 3-page form. This should be completed by someone of the owner or a representative of the owner. But the big thing here is that you want to make sure you are choosing the correct certification type. So if you are in the compliance period, so that means the first 15 years of LIHTC funding, you want to click the tax credit certification. If you have any HDAP units, you want to click gap financing. And then also if you are in extended use, it's the same. You just want to make sure you click extended use as the certification types. If you have two types of funding, meaning you're in the compliance period and you have HDAP units, you want to make sure you choose both. You just want to use the control button on your keyboard in order to choose both type of certifications. Okay. So again, I will show you this in here. So once you get to the annual cert, you click the button. And I've already entered this information, but this just gives you an overview of everything. So the first part is the property general information. So you want to make sure you have all of the up-to-date info. Now, again, remember my management and ownership info was not up to date. So I went through and said like, hey, here's the management contact. So it's in Canto and Madrigal, if anybody has seen that movie. And then the owner contact is Mirabelle. So you want to always put that information as detailed as possible in those two boxes so our analysts can update this info for you. Okay. Next, we go to the annual cert, and I talked about choosing the correct certification type. So this project is in extended use, but we also have home funds. So I have to hold down that control button and also click the gap financing. And you see both of those are chosen before I push the load button. And then you can also see they're both chosen there. If you think that you chose the wrong one, you just push the reset button, okay? That's all. Just make sure you do choose the correct one before you go through and answer all of the questions, because then you have to contact the help desk and we have to open up everything for you and you have to go through and answer all of the questions again. So just make sure you're doing this correctly the first time and just kind of take your time and make sure you're clicking that control button. So next, let's talk about some questions on the annual certification that you may need to be mindful of. You have to go through and answer the question. Just depending on what type of funding you have at the project, depends on the amount of questions you have to answer. So be mindful of that. If you have extended use, you're not going to have as long of a cert as someone that is in the first 15 years of compliance. Things that did impact COVID is first the number 3, where they ask you if the owner has received an annual income certification for each low-income tenant and/or documentation to support the certification, so on and so forth. Now, if you did use the waiver and you did not complete annual income research because of COVID, you do have to push no. And then in the explanation, like here, I said we utilized the IRS notice, and I talked about the 2020-53, where you didn't have to submit those income research for those units. But I also noted that there are clarification records in each one of my files to show that we did not do the income research. Be mindful of that if you didn't complete research for 2021. And then the other question that would impact you if you had some COVID impacts is question 8. And this is talk about amenities on the project. So maybe there's some amenities that were not open, like if you have a clubhouse or a pool or what have you on the project, but they weren't open during the 2021 year at any time. Maybe they just weren't open for a couple months or what have you. We do need to know this information. So if you push no here, just make sure you're telling us what amenities were closed and why, and for how long. Okay, so just be as detailed as possible there. Other explanations that you need to be reminded of is your affirmative fair housing marketing plan. We need to know when it was last revised or reviewed. So even if it wasn't revised, when's the last time we have reviewed it and giving you a approval letter? The training requirement on number 18. So someone should be coming to one of our lovely compliance trainings where you get to hear my voice all day, at least every 2 years. So that is the compliance policies and regulations training. And we also have the LIHTC essentials training. So you tell us who actually attended those trainings in the last 2 years. And then lastly, the supportive services plan question on question 19. We want to know when the last time the supportive services plan has been updated. So make sure you are entering in a date. So once all that info is updated, you just push next, put in all of your title info, and then you would push submit at the bottom. This has already been submitted. So you see that there's a lovely date stamp at the top because it tells you I submitted it a little earlier today. And then you can always print the certification for your records as well. Last thing I want to note is that if you are third-party managed, it is required to have a broker's license. So you must update this information on that organizations tab that I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation. So when I first logged in, so if you go to the organizations info, which you kind of logged me out, you just log back in and go to my organization. Whoever is the person that has the broker's license, you want to edit their information and make sure you're putting in the number and whenever that broker's license expires. Okay, so there needs to be something that's active here. As you see, all of these are expired in our lovely test project. So we would have to either enter in a new person or edit someone's old broker's license information and then push save. So that is how you enter that info. We do not need an actual copy of your broker's license, okay? We only want to see you updated in this page. So be mindful of that. Make sure you are only updating it here. We don't need the actual broker's license anymore. Okay, so let me go back here. I think I've covered everything when it comes to actually entering in information. So what happens after you've entered and submitted your tenant data and your annual owner cert? So after that first March 1st deadline, that is when our compliance analysts get busy and they start first doing all the updates to the project. So any owner contacts and management contact updates, those need to be updated in DevCo before we submit our letters. So it takes a while to do all those updates for over 1,500 properties. So my first thing is just be patient with our analysts. So just because it's been, a week or even a month after March 1st, it may take a while for you to get your compliance findings letter, but you will get it. Okay, so do not fret. Questions about findings, once you do get the letter, should be directed to the analyst listed on the actual letter. So do not contact the person that you're usually familiar with that does your audits. So those are two different analysts. So make sure you are actually contacting the analyst on the letter and not the person that you're probably familiar with and used to. So, and then of course, if you have any questions about how to do the findings, contact the DevCo help desk. The next tip here is that once your compliance findings are corrected, you must refinalize the project, okay? So remember, we went through that finalization process. We opened the year back up to active after March 1st. So then you were able to then go through, do all of your your updates, but then you need to refinalize, okay? So make sure you are refinalizing once you've done your findings from the letter, okay? Lastly, if you want an extension, so once you get your findings letter, there's usually just the 30 days that you have to do whatever findings and to submit it to your analyst. You got 30 days. You need to ask for an extension before your actual deadline. Do not wait until the deadline has passed to ask for an extension. This just prolongs the annual owner reporting process. And we want to get this done as quickly as possible, as I know you do as well. So make sure you are asking for the extension before your deadline, okay? And that means just emailing the analyst that's on the letter and requesting that extension that way. All right, so I have mentioned the compliance and DevCo and inspection help desk a lot throughout here. Like if you have a problem, contact the help desk. So this is just where it is. You can access it through that link at the bottom. And some tips for doing a help desk inquiry is to make sure that you are being as detailed as possible. So make sure you're choosing the correct category or subcategory, because we actually have it where, you know, certain people get certain help desk tickets depending on what the question is. So make sure you're going through and choosing the correct categories, but also include the bin and unit numbers. If the issue is concerning a particular unit, and this also can go for a utility allowance, like tell us what UA you're having issues with. But just be as detailed and tell us as much information as possible. Next, if you need to put a screenshot in the DevCo Help Desk, you have to actually be logged into DevCo. You can't go through the system that is outside of DevCo, so be mindful of that. You got to actually log in to put in a screenshot. I think that's about it for that. I feel like we're doing a great job. We have a great team that goes through and answers all our questions that you guys have in a very timely fashion these days. So again, utilize the help desk if you have any questions during this time. Then lastly, I do want to mention our FAQs or the compliance user guide. A lot of times, most of the answers are in both of those resources that we have. So definitely use our FAQs. There's a way to do keyword search on the FAQ feature, and you can go through and just look at all of the questions that we have available as well. And I can actually show that to you. We go up a little bit, go to DevCo. And the compliance and DevCo FAQs are right here. So again, you can go through, do keywords, or if you just want to see all of the different questions and categories that they're here. So you just open each one and it gives you the question. And then you can go through and open each one to see the answer. So please utilize these wonderful resources that we have available before you come to the help desk, just in case. If you haven't used the FAQs before, definitely go in and just see that maybe your question has already been answered. Okay. All right, so that brings me to the end of this presentation. So just a reminder, you don't get any CEUs or a certificate for this webinar training, but it will be available. We'll put a recording of the 2021 AOR webinar on the DevCo's videos page. Also, any other compliance trainings for the 2022 year will be coming out very soon. So we'll be putting out all of our training dates at the beginning of February, so be on the lookout for that. I offer the annual owner reporting webinar one more time on February 8th at 1 p.m. again. So if you missed out on something here and you want to hear it again, just come back and you can register on our website. Just go to this link at the bottom. But also just mention that we will have an extended use training that is going to come out soon, and that will be on demand. So that's going to be our first on-demand training. And then we actually have like income and asset on-demand trainings that are going to come out in 2022 as well. And then lastly, the compliance policies and regs, LIHTC essentials, and ACT rehab trainings will all be back in this year. So again, be on the lookout for that. We do have monthly updates that we send out to the industry, so make sure you are being a part of our constant contact list. And I think that's it. Let's see if we have any questions, which I know we do. You guys have been kind of busy. So I'm going to go up and start. Okay, so the first question we have is, someone says that the annual owner cert says that you should go from 2005 through 2018. I thought it was 2003 through 2017, but so if you were 2003 and 4, make sure you're also doing that as well. But you know what? I see Joan asked that question. I would just ask Kevin. Kevin Clark is the one who does do the annual the annual operating surveys. So if you think that you do not have to do it, if you have like a 2003 or 4 project, just contact him and he can answer those questions for you. Next, if we are not using the DevCo system to print the tick, do we need to list the income and assets in full, or can we just enter the total income? So if you aren't using the DevCo system to print ticks, that means, I'm guessing, you are using compliance software. And that means if you're doing compliance software that and correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, that you're doing XML uploads into DevCo. Now, if you have an XML upload, then all of that information automatically comes over. So that's not a big deal. But if you are not doing that, you have to open up the bottom anyway to put the income and asset information. So we would like to see as much info in DevCo as well. But usually you don't have to update or insert that info twice because you're doing an XML upload if you're printing ticks from compliance software. It's a good question though. You should just be uploading from your file. Someone asked if we enter multiple rent updates. So the answer could be yes, it just depends. So if your subsidy amount changes multiple times, then yes, you need to be entering multiple rent updates. Or if the UA info changed twice in a year, possibly, or whenever the tenant payment amount has changed. So yes, there may be a time where you have to enter in rent updates multiple times for one unit. Very good question. How can we get a paper copy of the AOC before we submit? I don't know if there is a way to get the paper copy of the AOC before you submit, to be honest. So you just have to go through, if you want to get just to know all the questions, maybe, then contact the help desk and I can give you, some type of form that gives you all of the questions on the AOCs, just if you want to look at the questions. But I don't think there's an actual way to do that in DevCo. So Athena did also say that it is from 2005 to 2018. So yes, that is confirmed. So it is not 2003 to 17. So that has been updated. So excuse me for being out of date. So yes, 2005 to 2018 for that annual operating survey. And let's see. And someone that said, do I need to go to the help desk to get the annual owner certification open back up? And the answer is yes. Always go to the help desk if maybe you answered a question wrong or forgot a question or something. Well, actually, you can't. I don't even think it'll allow you to forget a question, but maybe you forgot to submit a particular type of annual owner cert. So yeah, just contact the help desk and we will open it right back up for you. Great questions. I think that's it. I didn't have that many questions. Are there any other questions for today before we adjourn? Again, you can always reach out to me personally or contact the help desk for any other questions. So if I don't see anything else, I will let you guys go. I hope this was very helpful for you today. And thank you for attending. Everyone, have a great afternoon.